This is a lecture on the book of Job, part 3, Job chapters 32 through 42, dealing with the speech of Elihu and that of God. And my name is Dr. Joe Sprinkle. The book of Job deals with the question of why do people suffer. The prologue says that sometimes people suffer as a test of their faith. That's the case of Job. The friends will say that sometimes people suffer because of their sin. True in some cases, though not true in the case of Job. We'll see that Elihu sees suffering as a means of revelation from God and molding people's character. And then we'll find God's answer, whatever answer that might be, as to why good people suffer. The answer of Elihu is in Job chapters 32 through 37, that suffering is a revelation from God that can mold a person's character. Now, Elihu is introduced in chapter 32 because the debate between Job and his other three friends has come to a standstill. It says that so these three friends stopped answering Job because he was right in his own eyes. But now a fourth friend comes forth, Elihu. And Elihu claims he can give an answer that's different than the other friends. He shows anger and impatience with the foolishness of his elders, for you see, Elihu is young, and he's not quite so rigid in his thinking as the older friends. Elihu is introduced, verse 2. But Elihu the son of Barachel the Buzite of the family of Ram became very angry with Job for justifying himself rather than God. He was also angry with the three friends because they had found no way to refute Job and yet had condemned him. Now Elihu had waited before speaking to Job because they were older than he. But when he saw that these three men had nothing more to say, his anger was aroused. Now, Elihu is going to say that Job is wrong in blaming God and saying that God is unfairly punishing him. Or to put it in his words, he was justifying himself rather than God. Elihu also says that the friends are wrong in saying that Job suffers because he has sinned. As he put it, they found no way to refute Job and yet had condemned him. So he continues, 32:6. So Elihu the son of Barachel the Buzite said, I am young in years, and you are old, and that is why I was fearful, not daring to tell you what I know. I thought age should speak, advanced years should teach wisdom. But it is the spirit in a man, the breath of the Almighty, that gives him understanding. It is not only the old who are wise, not only the aged who understand what is right. Therefore I say, listen to me. I too will tell you what I know. I waited while you spoke. I listened to your reasoning while you were searching for words. I gave you my full attention. But not one of you have proved Job wrong. None of you have answered his arguments. Do not say, we have found wisdom. Let God refute him, not man. But Job has not marshaled his words against me, and I will not answer him with your arguments. And as the reader were tempted to say to Elihu, well, come forth, young man. Tell us what your arguments are. What do you have to say that's different? They are dismayed and have no more to say. Words have failed them. Must I wait, now that they are silent? Now that they stand there with no reply? Okay, Elihu, what do you have to say? I too will have my say. I will tell you what I know, for I am full of words. Well, Elihu, you're full of words, but what exactly are you going to say? And so we begin to wonder, does he really have anything to say at all? His long-winded introduction takes a whole chapter. He is full of words, as he put it. But he does give an answer, though it doesn't begin until chapter 33. So we've learned that Elihu is young and that he's wordy. He thinks Job and his friends are both wrong. The friends had found no answer and yet had condemned Job in 32:3. But then he starts to give his answer. Surely you have spoken in my hearing, and I have heard the sound of your words. I am pure, without transgression. I am innocent. There is no guilt in me. Behold, he invents pretexts against me. He counts me as his enemy. He puts my feet in the stocks. He watches all my paths. Behold, let me tell you, you are not right in this, for God is greater than man. What Elihu says is that Job is in error. Job thinks that God has found fault with him. But that's not true. Job thinks that God considers me his enemy. That also is not true. God is not inventing sins by which to punish Job for having committed. God is not Job's enemy. According to Elihu, Job suffers for a different reason. His reason is that pain can be a revelation from God. 33:13. Why do you complain to him that he answers none of man's words? For God does speak. Now one way, now another, though a man may not perceive it. In a dream, in a vision of the night, when deep sleep falls on men as they slumber in their beds, he may speak in their ears and terrify them with warnings, to turn man from wrongdoing and keep him from pride, to preserve his soul from the pit, his life from perishing by the sword. Or a man may be chastened on a bed of pain with constant distress in his bones. Here he sees pain as like a dream or a vision. God can speak through a dream or through a vision, but God can also speak through pain. Now, pain can be used by God to instruct us and to mold our character. Pain causes us to pray and thus increases our righteousness, as Elihu says in 33:26. After he suffers, he prays to God and finds favor with him. He sees God's face and shouts for joy. He is restored by God to his righteous state. Moreover, pain changes our direction, even for those who are generally righteous, when we begin to go wrong, lest something worse befall us. 33:30. He does pain to turn back his soul from the pit, that the light of life may shine on him. God speaks through pain as a means of revelation and instruction. That's the message of 33:14 through 16. And pain can chasten and humble us. In fact, there's some benefits to suffering. Suffering can make us tougher. Suffering teaches us sympathy when we see others suffer as we've suffered. Suffering can make us more pure. Suffering can increase our dependence on God. Suffering is necessary for certain types of greatness. Great athletes, great musicians, and so forth must suffer lots of practice and training time to become great at what they do. Suffering isn't all bad. Elihu also emphasizes that God does not deal unrighteously. He denies that God perverts justice. 34:10. So listen to me, you men of understanding. Far be it from God to do evil, from the Almighty to do wrong. And Job was mistaken to think that he had done so in his case. And men should not presume to know more than God. 36:22. God is exalted in his power. Who is a teacher like him? Who has prescribed his ways for him, or said to him, you have done wrong? Remember to extol his works, which men have praised in song. All mankind have seen it. Men gaze on it from afar. God's works in nature show his superior wisdom, as Elihu says in 37:14 through 19. Listen to this, Job. Stop and consider God's wonders. Do you know how God controls the clouds and makes his lightning flash? Do you know how the clouds hang poised, those wonders of him who is perfect in knowledge? You who swelter in your clothes when the land lies hushed under the south wind, can you join him in spreading out the skies, hard as a mirror of cast bronze? Tell us what we should say to him. We cannot draw up our case because of our darkness. God's wisdom is way beyond our wisdom. We can't understand it, and we can't make a case to correct him. So what are people to do? What people must do is fear God rather than questioning him. The Almighty is beyond our reach and exalted in power, in his justice and in his righteousness. He does not oppress. Therefore, men revere, literally fear him. Does he not have regard for all the wise in heart? Elihu's ultimate answer is the same as the end of the song on wisdom in Job 28. What Job needs to do is express fear of the Lord, that is, piety. And now we finally come to God's answer in Job 38. While Job was talking to his friends, a storm cloud has approached. And this storm is no ordinary storm, but God himself, coming down in the form of a storm to speak to Job. 38 and verse 1, then the Lord answered Job out of the storm. And what God is going to do is ask all kinds of questions, questions which Job lacks the wisdom to judge, questions about things that only God could do. And so God says to Job, who is this that darkens my counsel with words without knowledge? Brace yourself like a man, and I will question you, and you will answer me. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me if you understand. Who marked off its dimensions? Surely you know. Who stretched a measuring line across it? On what were its footing set? Or who laid its cornerstone? While in the morning stars sang together, all the angels shouted for joy. Who shut up the sea behind doors when it burst forth from the womb? When I made the clouds its garments and wrapped it in thick darkness? When I fixed limits for it and set its doors and bars in place? When I said, this far you may come and no farther. Here is where your proud waves halt. Have you ever given orders to the morning or shown the dawn its place, that it might take the earth by the edges and shake the wicked out of it? Job, do you know the laws of the heavens? Can you set up God's dominion over the earth? Can you raise your voice to the cloud and cover yourself with a flood of water? Do you send the lightning bolts on their way? Do they report to you, here they are? And Job has got to answer, well, only you, God, can do those things. Only you, God, know how to do those things. God has put Job in his place, and Job knows it. He either can't answer God's questions or has to admit that only God could know or do these things. And so he is left dumbfounded. And so in Job chapter 40, verses 3 through 5, Job answered the Lord, I am unworthy. How can I reply to you? I put my hand over my mouth. I spoke once, but I have no answer. 2 times, but I will say no more. And then God will give some illustrations of his uncontrollability in Job chapter 40 and 41. And that involves two animals. And there's some debate over the identity of these animals. The two animals are named Behemoth and Leviathan. And there are three views about these animals. One is a mythological view that these are mythological creatures. A second is the dinosaur view, that these are dinosaurs. And then there's the hippopotamus and crocodile view. First, the mythological view. The mythological view says that Leviathan is actually a mythological creature. The word in Hebrew, Leviathan, is cognate with Lithon or Lothon of Canaanite mythology. And in the Canaanite mythology, he was a great monster. And Leviathan is described in the text of Job as like a fire-breathing dragon. 41:19, firebrands stream from his mouth, sparks of fire shoot out, smoke pours from his nostrils as from a boiling pot over a fire of reeds. His breath sets coals ablaze, and flames dart from his mouth. Now, against the myth view, Job does refer to animals in chapter 39 especially. Talks about deer and wild donkeys and oxen and ostriches and horses and hawks. But these are all ordinary animals and not mythological creatures. Given that he's been talking about animals that are ordinary animals, it seems strange he would jump to mythological creatures. Moreover, there's the theological problem of God in Job assuming the real existence of mythological creatures. A second view is, you might call the dinosaur view. Behemoth is said to have a tail like a cedar. That would be fitting of certain dinosaurs that we know about from remains that have been found in the earth. And Leviathan would then be some sort of fire-breathing aquatic dinosaur. But against the dinosaur view is that there is no evidence that dinosaurs coexisted with humanity as late as the time of the patriarchs. That would be Job's day. And the hypothesis of a fire-breathing dinosaur lacks objective evidence. There's no proof that any of the dinosaurs breathed fires. The third view is that these are ordinary animals, and you can even identify them as the hippopotamus and the crocodile. Both animals are very dangerous. Crocodiles, of course, can eat people, but it turns out that hippopotamuses kill more people in Africa than do crocodiles. We do, by the way, have evidence of hippopotamuses in the Jordan Valley from ancient times, so they are extinct there today. Both share the same habitats, so they can be discussed together. Hippos are hidden among the reeds in the marsh and live in rivers the way that crocodiles can. The problem with this view is, well, how does a hippopotamus have a tail like a cedar? Their tails are relatively small, especially as compared with the rest of their body. And are crocodiles fire-breathing? Well, in terms of the tail like a cedar, his tail sways like a cedar, the sinews of his thigh are close-knit, is how it's put in 40 and verse 17. Notice that there's a parallel between tail and sinews of the thigh. Sinews of the thigh may refer to the testicles, in which case this tail, in parallelism, could be understood as the great male genital of the hippopotamus, a symbol of strength and virility. And that would be a way of understanding Job's language. As far as Leviathan being said to snort fire and smoke, well, remember, this is poetry, and this may not be literal language, but a description of the appearance of light going through the mist of water produced when a crocodile sneezes, which looks like flashes of light and smoke. This sort of thing then could lead to the mythological exaggerations that led to referring to Leviathan as a Canaanite mythological monster. I do have a picture here of a crocodile sneezing, and add a little bit of light, and it would look a lot like a fire-breathing dragon. Well, anyway, we will work on the assumption that it is the hippopotamus and the crocodile. And this is what it says about him. Look at the behemoth which I made along with you, and which feeds on the grass like an ox. What strength he has in his loins, what power in the muscles of his belly. His bones are tubes of bronze, his limbs are like rods of iron. He ranks first among the works of God. When the river rages, he is not alarmed. He is secure, though the Jordan should surge against his mouth. Can anyone capture him by the eyes, or trap him and pierce his nose? And then of Leviathan it says in chapter 41, can you pull in Leviathan with a fishhook, or tie down his tongue with a rope? Can you put a cord through his nose, or pierce his jaw with a hook? Will he keep begging you for mercy? Will he speak to you with gentle words? Will he make an agreement with you for you to take him as your slave for life? Can you make him a pet, like a bird, and put him on a leash for your girls? If you lay a hand on him, you'll remember the struggle and never do it again. What's the point that God is making from these two creatures, Behemoth and Leviathan? You cannot control Behemoth. You cannot control or tame Leviathan. But just as you cannot control Behemoth and Leviathan, neither can you control God. Job 41:10, no one is fierce enough to rouse them. Who then is able to stand against me? You cannot control Behemoth or Leviathan or God. You cannot win an argument with God, and what's left is that you have to trust in God's goodness. Job is being told, in effect, by God this: I am God and you are man. You cannot win an argument against me. You cannot make me a comfortable part of your theology. You cannot control me. When you were asking me to come down and mediate with you, you were trying to control me. When you said that my whole universe is unjust, you're putting yourself in my place. But look at my might and my wisdom, and then how can you say that I'm unjust? In the end, we lack the wisdom to judge God. We lack the power to control God. We're left with but one option. We must let God be God and trust in his goodness. Or as Andrew Steinman puts it, in the end, God calls on Job to give up his questioning and return to his simple, trusting faith. And that is what Job does. Job then responds by repenting. Then Job replied to the Lord, I know that you can do all things. No plan of yours can be thwarted. You ask, who is this that obscures my counsel without knowledge? Surely I spoke of things I did not understand, things too wonderful for me to know. You said, listen now, and I will speak, and I will question you, and you shall answer me. My ears have heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. Therefore I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes. Now you might ask the question, back in chapter 3, when Job cursed the day of his birth, did Job lose his faith? I think it's fair to say that his faith was bent, but his faith did not buckle and collapse. And in the end, Job emerges with a faith that is far richer and deeper than it had been before. And God in turn goes on to bless Job more than Job had been blessed before. He's given new wealth and a new and beautiful family and a long life. Chapter 42, 12 through 17. Well, what about Job's friends? Well, the Lord rebukes them. After the Lord had said these things to Job, he said to Eliphaz the Temanite, I am angry with you and your two friends because you have not spoken of me what is right, as my servant Job has. So now take 7 bulls and 7 rams and go to my servant Job and sacrifice a burnt offering for yourselves. My servant Job will pray for you, and I will accept his prayer and not deal with you according to your folly. You have not spoken of me what is right, as my servant Job has. And so Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite did what the Lord told them, and the Lord accepted Job's prayer. Now you might ask the question, what about Elihu, the 4th friend? He's not even mentioned in the epilogue to the book. Why is he not rebuked? Well, some scholars, like Longman, say, well, he's too insignificant to be rebuked. But I don't think that's right, personally. I think Elihu is not rebuked because insofar as he goes, Elihu's answer was correct. God does use suffering as a means of revelation and as a means of molding our character. And so we come to a conclusion. Why is it that good people suffer? Why is it that people in general suffer? Well, sometimes we suffer as a test of our faith. That's what happened to Job, chapters 1 and 2. Sometimes we suffer because of sin. The answer of Job's friends, wrong in Job's case, but true enough in many cases. Sometimes God allows us to suffer to mold our character and as a means of revelation, the answer of Elihu. But then sometimes we suffer for reasons known only to God. Note that God never tells Job while he suffers. At the end, he doesn't have a clue. And sometimes, when we suffer, we're in the same situation. But like Job, we must let God be God and trust that somehow our suffering fits into his goodness. So that is my analysis of the book of Job. And my name is Dr. Joe Sprinkle.